Welcome back to the Minutes to Win podcast. I'm your host, David Russell. Today's episode is sponsored by Habitly.com. And, when you think about organizational excellence, have you really trained your people on the details there? Have you really considered the habits they have? Some people have habits that they're really good in certain areas of, providing a great client experience and doing the work really well, but maybe they don't communicate that well with clients. Maybe they don't communicate well with their team. Maybe they don't document their work well. So organizational excellence has a lot to do with knowing essential people skills. How do you communicate with others? How do you document your work? How do you get along? How do you not get angry? How do you make the most of meetings? We've got all of that on Habitly.com. Check it out. It's very inexpensive and 7 days are free. So you have nothing to lose. Today's Manage to Win podcast is with Linc Kroeger, and he is president at Night Moves. Now, Night is like the chess piece. It begins with a K, nightmoves.org. And they are working with Native American, rural, and urban underserved communities, basically high school students. And how do you get them involved in learning technology to help them break the cycle of poverty and really have more of a fulfilling career? Let's dive in, see what Linc has to say. Welcome, Linc, to the show. Really glad to have you on. You have some unique background and things that you're doing as a social innovator and president of Night Moves. So please introduce yourself to the audience. Give them a little background.
Yeah. Hi, David, and thanks for having me on the show. This is awesome. So I'm Linc. I have been in the enterprise technology space for 35 years. When I say enterprise technology, what I mean is, you think of Fortune 50, Fortune 500, Silicon Valley startups, right? Department of Defense, typically large enterprise class business systems or, larger systems, not like websites and things like that, unless it would be like a big giant website, something big. So I've spent my career in this space, from commercial software development to consulting, to running IT shops, right? Mostly in the software development and package implementation space. And I pivoted my career over the last couple of years to being still in the same technology space, but taking everything I've learned from my, hiring hundreds of people and, corporate culture to, what are all the gaps that we need to really address to advance diversity and inclusion. And that's my core mission now, is helping organizations fill those gaps because really diversity and inclusion today, it's people hiring from other companies, right? And they're just moving people around. They're really not a lot in solving diversity and inclusion from my experience.
Well, I'm really interested to hear, what you're doing in the area. You list Native American, rural, and urban underserved communities and how to break that cycle. So how to get the people that either aren't in better paying jobs today or don't have jobs at all. How do you get that to change? And it is you're uniquely involved, at least as far as our guests go, with the Native American communities. And here in California, where we see Native American communities, we see them in casinos. And that doesn't seem like, the ideal career path for most people or the best thing in a community. A lot of times it brings along with it a lot of other negatives. So I'm really open to your thoughts. What's going on out there, and what do we need to do as leaders?
Yeah. So, Native Americans in every, of those three areas we focused on, right? Rural, Native American, and urban underserved or inner city. They're all very different, right? Different context, different approaches. But we all go in to everyone with the same attitude that we don't know anything. And we come in with some data points and we say, tell us more. Why does this exist? So, and I'll answer your Native American question, but, like, for example, inner city young Black men, right? Why aren't you going to go to college, right? And we don't lead into any assumptions like it's money, right? We just want to hear from their perspective. So like with Native Americans, and, in most Native American, I know you have a tribe right outside of like where you live in Sacramento that is more extended, suburb, but most Native American tribes are out in the middle of nowhere, right? They're moved to, places that there aren't populations. There's an interesting paradox we saw that Native Americans have one of the lowest attendance rates of four-year college, but yet when there's often scholarships for Native Americans that go unfilled. So we went and talked with tribal leaders, and we said, "Hey, why does this paradox exist? Right? Why is this?" And they said, "Well, Linc, you need to understand something, right? Well, for one, you group all Native Americans together as Native Americans, and the reality is there's like 374 recognized tribes by the federal government. From Navajo to Comanche to Sioux to Cheyenne to Sac and Fox to Kiowa, right? Keep going. And you may look at us as one people group, but we're really the Sac and Fox tribe, or we're our own people group, right? It's kind of like saying to somebody Korean, you're Asian, which is true, but they'd probably identify as Korean, right? So they said that you need to realize there's only 4,000 of us left in existence on this planet, right? On this small plot of land out in the middle of nowhere. And if our kids leave and go to college, they don't come back. So we actually encourage our next generation that when they graduate high school, that they stay here, right? But that creates a whole preponderance of problems because besides the casino and some other jobs that are common, what opportunity does someone have that's Native American, right, who stays with their tribe? And I can tell you that the desire for the young Native Americans is, from the feedback they give us, is they want to stay and they want the opportunity. So when we come and we present, like about 2 months ago, we presented to a tribe, all their 8th through 11th graders, our opportunity, which I know we haven't talked about yet, but we'll get there. And but the short version of what it is we bring the training to them for advanced technology jobs locally, and then we bring the employer to them, which means it's not like we just train people and say, go find a job, right? We literally, because our program is rated by employers as higher than a 4-year computer science degree, it's very coveted to get our graduates from these companies. And companies love the ability to include Native Americans, right? And most companies go, well, we've never had an ability to do this, right? There's not, a system that feeds that talent to us. So when we presented to these 8th through 11th graders, and we said, presenting the opportunity, and we said, well, the next step, if you're interested, is sign up for the software development course, right? So in that case, 58% of all their students said, if we had this opportunity, we'd sign up for that software development course. And if you're familiar with like college outreaches to high school groups, they typically get a 1 or 2% response rate, right, to sign up for an actual computer science course. So when you think about 58% of all the kids, right, no profiling, no filter, those that would like math or STEM, just sharing the opportunity. And of those, 48% were female, which is off the charts. For the average attendance rate of women in 4-year computer science degree nationally is about 21%, right? So for 48% of these women to say, I'm interested in this, what do I do next, right? So phenomenal. And that's the highest response we get from any demographic is Native Americans, because they want to be able to stay with their tribe and their people, right?
Okay, so I want to go into the urban community later. I don't want to just totally leave that. But staying here, so 2 questions come up immediately for me with the Native Americans who I would love to see something happen that's positive. Because the statistics I see are that the lack of education, the drug use, other things are very high on many of the reservations. And so talk to me about what is the family structure to be able to support this, and also how good is the K through 12 education system where the Native Americans are getting educated well enough in their schools that then they can jump into your curriculum without having to do. I mean, we got kids showing up at universities now from all throughout the United States, who don't know basic English, they don't know math, and yet they're being passed in high school and being allowed to go to college, but they haven't gotten the education. So how is it on the reservation?
And and it might be. So I have a small sample set of the number of the tribes I'm working with right now, and it might be, since the tribes that are reaching out to us, they're more solid in their education, right, in K through 12. But I haven't seen that at all in the Midwest tribes. I did do a tour out in eastern state of Washington, like around Spokane, for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, but I didn't get to visit their schools out there, so I can't compare it. But in the Midwest, like Iowa, Oklahoma, Kansas, I've found the schools were excellent, right? The K through 12 schools, working with the kids, I haven't seen any difference. In fact, I would actually say, interestingly, that the kids are more engaged and more alert than an inner city school by far, right? So if I'm in an inner city area, one of my big challenges is, I'll go in and let's say there's 25 high schoolers I'm talking to, there might be 5 to 10 asleep, right? And how do you reach
Yeah.
anybody? So, I mean, they'll literally just be asleep in class and nobody wakes them up, right? Culture wise, yeah, and I'd say that's pretty pervasive. I'm sure there's schools that doesn't happen, but it's pretty darn hard to, and some of the schools I'm working with now have a 50% African American male high school graduation rate, right? Which there's no good future in that, right? You're talking probably incarceration, gangs, right? I mean, if and I'll say a big problem is they're asleep and nobody's waking them up, right? Or maybe I'm just not that interesting of a speaker too. But I can tell me, right? It's kind of like, okay, they're used to coming in, they sit, they go to sleep. But Native American, it's just, and I tell you, the experience of going into a school that's Native American, right, where it's all Native American kids, right? Super. I mean, it feels like when I went to school, fun, energetic, just super engaged, very alert. Asking questions. I've not seen anyone asleep, and the teachers are very alert. Like if somebody's like getting off base to pull them back in. A big part of our teachers really engaged. So my K through 12 experience, which is very limited again to the Midwest tribes, has been super positive with the kids. It's the experience is more of working with the adults. It's what you described, right? I mean, you can be working with kids, and I'm just being frank and direct and maybe too transparent in my discussion. But when I'm working with the K through 12, there's not a big weight problem. In fact, I would say in the Native American tribes I've been to, like the K through 12, typically for me it's like 8th through 11th grade, right? I'm working with very fit, prim, and then as soon as you start working with more of the adults, you get into all the type 2 diabetes, right? You get into a lot more obesity, and I can't tell you exactly why, but my assumption is they stay and there's not a lot of opportunity, right? Not a lot of hope. And then, your alcoholism and all these things go through the roof on these tribes. But, that's anecdotal of just me walking in and seeing, expecting more. Like, you go into a normal school in our city, there's a lot of obesity in our next generation, right? And
It's very sad.
I didn't see that with the Native American kids, but you do see it with adults. Yeah. And again, I need a lot more data points to really prove it. I'm just sharing experiences.
I mean, and you're bringing up the courses and you're talking about like you're going into inner city. And just to clarify for our audience, I don't think you and certainly I am not condemning these kids who are falling asleep, who don't know how to behave, because that's being taught to them or allowed by parents and or educators. And the environment they're in, which inner city can be extremely rough, gang related types of things. So I'm not bringing up any of this stuff without empathy for the people who are living in that environment. But how do you engage there, Linc, and get these people to realize that there is a better life, there is a different life out there, and tech is one way out of, quite frankly, with inner city, it's one way out of poverty.
Yeah, and so our inner city strategy is different than Native American and rural. In inner city, it's much more working with other nonprofits who are already focused on working with, minority immigrants, low income populations, and we're really they've already done the hard work, right? Where they've made the relationships, they provide a support structure. Because in our experience too, is inner city kids require, and I say kids, sorry, these are high schoolers, I shouldn't say kids, but they need a lot more support structure, right? And there's nothing political about what we do. When I say, I'll see 10 kids asleep and I've done 50 presentations, and you're like, per class, that's a data point that we go, okay, now what do we do about that, right? Or is there anything we can do about it? And you just work with the kids who do work, right? But we look at it and say, how do we solve the problem, not point our finger at the problem, like you said, right? It's with empathy, but it's also, let's solve this. So working with other nonprofits, trying to get some of the local students who are, really engaged, is getting them to get these young kids, right, in another environment to recruit them. I'd say we're experimenting now. We haven't done this, but what we want to do is, back to feedback, right, is talk to these young kids and say, hey, why aren't you, are you going to college? And if not, why aren't you? And the number one reason we hear for young Black men is, and I mention young Black men with inner city, and I try not to focus on them, but they're really the biggest puzzle we're really trying to focus on. You look at, and I'm generalizing a little, so forgive me if I get too general, but Hispanic population has a much stronger family structure, right, and encouraging education. So it's way easier to go and share education and get excitement about it. But and Black females are not hard to connect with. But young Black men are definitely, of any group we talk to, in my experience, are the hardest to connect with, right? So it's what we're doing with that, though, is going, okay, like there's a nonprofit we work with that what they do is they survey these young high schoolers and say, what do you think you're going to be when you grow up, right? With your potential jobs. And there's one we work with, and they do the survey. And they said, well, 3 answers we get out of the top 5 every time are for young Black men, like, freshman, sophomore in high school, that it's rapper, basketball player, or drug dealer, right? That they see those come up all the time in their top 5 potential jobs they could be when they grow up. And you go, okay, now what do we do with that? We don't use it to judge. We do it to go, what do we do? So what we're working on right now is going, well, what if we did a triathlon where these young men got the opportunity to play basketball, and then we took them to an area that's their next stage of the triathlon where they could learn in 15 minutes how to write code. I mean, something simple, right? Where everything's there for them, and maybe they just make an LED flash or a robot walk, but they do it, they experience it, and they went, wow, I actually, within 45 minutes, wrote code. And I'd never even imagined in my life I'd ever write code, right? So, and maybe there's a rapping one we do, and there's one we do that's with basketball, but how do we take what they're interested in and then give them an experience that opens their mind to possibilities, to what what could be possible for them, or that they could enjoy? So that's what we're experimenting with now, is different kind of, I'd say, innovative approaches, but we always base it on what's interesting to them, right? Not what's interesting to us, and then keep tying to it. So anyway, got a little verbose there, but that's
yeah, I appreciate the creativity, and I think that's great. But as you're aware, you still have the family environment, whatever that is, that they come home to each night. And you mentioned the Hispanic community often is one that values education and is trying to hold them accountable, maybe to homework or whatever, or attendance. I don't know, different things. But you have other people in the community, including some Hispanics, it can be Black, white, probably less on the Asian side, but whatever heritage, where the family structure isn't in place. So it sounds like what you're doing is you're working with nonprofits to really identify who are the young people who want to break the cycle. For whatever reason, they've identified that, and they want to break the cycle, and they have enough family structure in place, living environment in place, where they're a high potential to break the structure. Is that right? You're leaning on those local nonprofits to kind of.
Yeah, and you think about like organizations like Big Brothers, Big Sister, Job Corps, right? I mean, there's a lot of organizations that really care, that go out and build these relationships and give them the support that they may not have at home, right? When I mentioned earlier too, young kids sleeping, I have no idea what they go to at home, right? I mean, are they at home all night and there's music on, or who knows? Are they eating crappy high carbohydrate sugar, and that's their entire diet, right? So
or do they have a job and they work all night because their family needs the money?
Exactly.
And then they come to school and they're just exhausted.
Yeah, I just see what's happening, right? But yeah, exactly. So no judgment on that. I don't know, but I just know what I see when I'm there, and I go, all right, I know if they're sleeping, they're never going to hear this opportunity. And how do you break that cycle, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, but really focused on, and we don't need that support structure of other nonprofits in rural or Native American, right? It's just, I mean, if you go to a rural community, we just go right to the counselors in the schools and say, can we talk to your students? And and you still obviously have family structure issues wherever you go, right? It's just much more severe in inner city than it is in rural and Native American. And Native American has their own family challenges, right? I mean, there's usually, with every student we're working with, they have maybe an aunt or an uncle that's more of a primary than their parent, but somebody in the family will bring them in if their parents become alcoholics, or with drugs or something like that. You'll see there much more. And again, we're generalizing, but you'll see much more that somebody in that family will attach to them and make sure they've got that support structure. So we really heavily rely on more, again, more the inner city of organizations really, because we know we can't do it. We know if we get a young man or woman in our program and they don't have support in their life, they may be understanding everything technically and passing education-wise on it. But if the rest of their life falls apart, it doesn't matter. So it's got to be comprehensive in inner city. I know we focus a lot on this inner city there, but
no, that's fine. That's fine. So your program, and is the program called Night Moves, like Night of the Round Table type of thing?
yeah, like night, like a chess piece, not like the Bob Seger song.
Okay. So how long does it take for someone to go through that program?
So about 90% of our focus is on high school students. So we'll talk about that, and for a couple of reasons. One is if you want to keep people out of gangs and out of trouble, you got to start younger, right? If you want to stop incarceration, don't wait until they're incarcerated. We need those programs too, but let's get people when they're younger, get them interested, give them possibilities for the future. But especially in the tech space, we're roughly 1.4 million open jobs a year in computer science related jobs, right? So massive shortage of talent in the space. If we're going to solve that, we've got to get people interested when they're younger. And I can tell you, it doesn't matter if I'm inner city, Native American, or rural, going in and talking to high school students, they have no interest in a career in tech overall, right? Very, very small percentage. They know very little about it. They just have not been exposed to it. Probably more disadvantaged in rural than urban, because in urban, at least, you have at least exposure to it. Whereas in rural, there's almost no exposure to anything tech, right? I mean, other than them using phones, but there's a lot of STEM shops and outreaches in the STEM and computer science space in the cities. So the youth is, we focus on getting, in most states, you can take dual enrollment community college courses in high school at no cost to the students in the United States, most states. So we don't want to replicate what's already going well. We want to come in, we can speak for 30 minutes to a group of students, and we'll see 30 to 40% of them say, wow, this is really interesting. I had no idea I had an interest in technology for a career. Tell me what to do next. And then we point them to sign up for this computer science course next semester. That's free to them. It's part of their, and again, it's usually starting their junior year in high school is how most schools do it. Well, if you like, and here's part of the pitch, right, is we're not asking you to do a career pathway and decide this is your career. We're just saying take one course. And if you like it, take these next 6 courses. And if you don't, you know what? If you end up being a doctor or an architect or any of these other aspects, then you'll have had a computer programming class. And no matter what you do, you'll have an edge up on your competition, because none of them probably do. And you'll know how software works. Because no matter what job you get today, there's an element of technology you need to understand. And they go, that makes sense. And if you like it, keep going. So once they finish those 7 total courses that's our prerequisite that they can typically take via the local education system, right? And I'm talking like Java, C#, Python, database, right? The standard courses, that's usually about 2 to 2.5 years for them to complete those courses. And then our program is 6 months of training. And when I say training, we're not classroom based, we're not grade based. It's you join a team of 7 to 12 people and you create real world solutions for at least 6 months. When I say create real world solutions, I mean, we're creating technology the same way that a Google team would create technology, right? So it's all modern. It's from methodology to tools to, and I won't get into all the technical mumbo gumbo of it, but so you spend 6 months doing that, and minimally 6 months. And the only way you graduate is you demonstrate you can do every aspect of the job. That's why employers, when they hire our graduates, they will say, wow, hiring your graduate saves us $25,000 to $35,000 over hiring a 4-year computer science graduate, because they literally walk in and say, okay, point me to your source code, point me to this, point me to that. And they're coding on a team the first week, right? Which is something that very, very few 4-year computer science degree students can do, graduates can do, is right? Just come in, plug in, and be productive. But after they do our training, then the plan is that they become an employee of our company, and they go from doing work on the training projects to doing work for actual commercial clients. And this is a big part of the appeal for students to get them interested is the projects they're working on while they're being trained is we focus on social innovations, meaning instead of, creating a technology for, and this is one of the questions we ask students is, prospective students is, hey, why does Uber and Airbnb and Silicon Valley create all these technologies? They go, well, to get rich, right? To sell it and, and it's like, well, that's part of it, right? A lot of it's innovation, but it is a lot of that is they want to get rich. Everything we do, we're the Silicon Valley for public benefiting causes, right? Like, how do we end hunger? How do we end homelessness, sex trafficking, right? All these areas. But we do it to enrich other people's lives because we don't even charge for it when we build it. And the kids go, oh, that's amazing that you're doing that. And we give them some examples of solutions that are, changing the world. And they say, well, that's cool. And we say, well, why don't you join us and be part of this? And they go, well, we don't know anything in technology. Exactly. Next semester, here's this class, right? Sign up for this course. And then once you get through it, and this is something that we get a lot of feedback on, especially from at-risk and underserved community populations, is they love the idea. I mean, again, if you ask, when we've asked young Black men, why don't you want to go to college? I very rarely hear it's about the money. It's usually other things, like maybe I just have never even thought about it, or it can't do it for me. It's not a possibility. But sometimes, the most prevalent answer we hear is the last thing I want to do is go sit in classrooms for 4 to 5 years, memorize, I die, right? I need to be active. I need to be doing things. There's just no way I'm going to go and do that, right? I won't even use some of the slang that they use to describe the people that conform to the standards. But what they love about our program is day one, you're on a team building real world solutions, right? You're working with real users. When you write a software program for college, you turn it into your professor, they grade it and throw it away, and that's it, right? I mean, so how much of your heart's in it to learn and to get a grade? When you're doing a project for us, you're actually working with someone at a homeless shelter, right? Or a woman who's just escaped sex trafficking and is in a safe house. And we're developing a solution on how do we enable their life? How do we make it better? And you're actually working with real people you're impacting, right? In real organizations. And your software, when it's done, goes into production to really do something real. So the state of engagement and alertness and not being classroom based and actually building something together, it's very attracting to these young people because they're, our next generation.
Okay, so Linc, so what you're saying is that it's about 2 years at the high school level and then additional 6 months to 2 years at college.
It's about 3 years in total, approximately, depending on how fast you go. Okay. Right? Adults can get through it in 2 years.
Okay, so that's that. And what about the cost? Is this like standard community college, like cost or credits type of thing, or how does that work?
Our cost to provide the training is between $15,000 and $20,000, depending where they're at, per person to do our training. And as long as they meet our criteria, we say, hey, here's the deal. You don't pay up front. You don't pay till it's over. And if you don't get the job, you don't pay for it. It's a job guarantee. So, if you're focused on helping underserved populations, we have to break that barrier to cost. Now, it's still $15,000 to $20,000, right? We got to pay for. But then after they start their job, then for 6 months, it comes out of their salary those first 6 months. So basically, you think of it this way, right? The first 6 months of your training, you're creating solutions for nonprofit, public benefiting causes. Your next 6 months, it's more of an apprenticeship kind of model where you're making $15 an hour, but the rest of the money you're making goes to pay off your training. So at the end of that 6 months, you go to work and get your final job, but you have no debt. So you're 20 years old, you started around $60,000 a year, and you have no debt from our program. Does that make sense?
So let me clarify. So what you're saying is that if I do this program, let's say it takes me three years. So I've gone through the 3 years and there's no upfront cost to me. And then I get a job working for your company, right?
Yeah, or one of our partners. But yeah,
or one of your partners. And the compensation there, it's at the start is $60,000.
Yeah. So their very first 6 months is going to be, they're going to get about $15 an hour and the rest goes to pay off the training.
Correct.
And then they're going to start at around $60,000 a year to start their real career off, right?
Okay. So think of it as, that sounds very interesting. And so where are these programs available?
So we're community-based only, meaning we'll pick specific communities that are matches with us. And on our website of nightmoves.org, you can actually go in there and you can see, hey, here's the kind of communities that would be a good match for us. and you can send a note to say, I'd love to talk about this for our community, right? Right now we're in Iowa where this is birthed, where this started, but we're working on expanding in Missouri and Ohio and, really any state we'd go to. But the biggest challenge we're having right now, David, is because of COVID, with all these massive openings in computer science jobs. 2 years ago, work from anywhere became the standard, and it still is the standard for most software development jobs, is that these recruiters were like, okay, we need to fill hundreds of thousands of positions, right? So if someone can write a line of code and you're teaching at a community college out in the middle of wherever, they went after them. And I call it eating your seed, right? So you're in the middle of winter and you're hungry and you've got your seed you're going to plant in the spring. Ooh, do I suck it up and not eat my seed, or so I can plant something? And that's what we've done, right? Is I, just a very rough estimate. I would say 1 in 15 communities we work with can actually provide an instructor either in computer science, either in the high school or community college level. It is the most extremely hard, challenging thing we've had, because you can make, all of a sudden you live out in the middle of nowhere and you can make $30,000 a year more. And the only job in town before was the community college. They've taken those jobs. So, but now there's nobody to teach our kids, right? There's nobody to teach them computer science.
So what I would say, so I want to wrap up because I want people to contact you if this interests them. I want people to contact you if they're interested in being an instructor, whether they could do that part-time via Zoom, whether they have to be in person, whatever, you guys can work out details. I'd like people to consider that. And I include in this encouragement, young people who want to go out and make a difference in the world, because this is huge for young people to positively impact the lives of other young people. And then also, whether you're business leaders, whether you're a community, to reach out to nightmoves.org. I got it right, correct?
Yep. Just night with a K, like a chess piece, not the Bob Seger.
That's right. Nightmoves.org. And maybe connect with Linc or another person on his team. Learn more about this. Our communities need this. It's one of the pieces of the puzzle to not only meet some business needs we have for some more tech people, but also to positively affect people in our community who need a hand up more than a hand out. And I want to thank you, Linc, for being on the show. It's been a lot of good information for everybody. And I hope that people contact you, and you're welcome to use, this podcast. We'll give you a copy, or we'll give you the link, send it out to people who think might be interested. But this really helped, explain things. I really appreciate you being on.
Yeah. Thanks for the time and to hear the story and to invite people to join our journey and help us. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you like the episode with Linc, please subscribe, leave us a comment or a rating. We'd love to hear back from you. And stay tuned. Got more great guests coming. Bye for now.